Here are some common power functions elements: M, L, and XL motors, and the two battery boxes. Slightly rarer parts include the controllers, the receiver, and perhaps the train motor. A few weeks ago, we made a video on some even rarer elements like the solar panel and the energy meter. This week, we take a look at another such part, courtesy of the Track Turbo RC. 8183 contains 92 parts and cost $40 in 2009, though we got ours used from eBay for a mere $25. More on that in a bit. This is one of just two sets to have an electric motor RC with steering mechanism and receiving unit, a one-piece car chassis with a drive motor, a steering servo, a battery box, and a PF receiver. It comes in the usual power functions colors: light gray, dark gray, and orange. LEGO has more recently made similar hubs for Powered Up and Control Plus, though these offer significantly more flexibility. The Track Turbo RC comes with a normal PF transmitter. The red channel controls the throttle, and the blue channel controls the steering. This style of remote only allows for on-off control, but that seems sufficient given the relatively low top speed and the relatively tight turn radius. That being said, the steering seems to have trouble starting from dead center. It does much better when starting offset to the opposite side. This set was advertised as incomplete and broken, and subsequently cost little. While it was certainly incomplete, it wasn't entirely broken. The functions work, but the channel selector is stuck on channel 3 and only responds to channel 1. Let's see if we can fix this and maybe address the steering as well. 8 T6 torque screws hold the chassis together, and good luck if you don't have the right bit. The tiny heads are hard to engage. The two under the battery terminals are particularly hard to access, and removing the screws is generally a pain, especially with the amount of corrosion present. Still, with the screws out, the top and bottom separate without much hassle, but pay attention to the steering servo. The magnet and electromagnet want to stick to the lid, and the tiny coil wires can easily break off the main PCB despite having a decent amount of slack. Inside, we see the steering mechanism in the front, a single circuit board in the middle, and the drive gearbox in the back. In our unit, we also saw a lot more corrosion, most likely from leaking battery acid, but we need to remove the PCB entirely to access that channel selector switch. Ultimately, this involved cutting the wires to the battery terminals and soldering them back afterward. We also had to resolder the wires for the steering, since they inevitably broke after only a little bit of handling. We didn't bother to film this because even after removing significant corrosion with a chisel and scrubbing the remainder with isopropyl alcohol, we could not fix the switch. It now moves, but it still only responds to channel 1. At this point, we can finally drive the assembled set. Much like the tiny cars in multi-challenge racetrack, 8183 is fundamentally just a smattering of parts on a chassis, but this definitely helps with durability. The low part count and subsequent low weight also help with performance. Perhaps common for car sets back then and today, the aesthetic relies a lot on stickers, and I think the model looks better without the silly hubcaps. The steering appears to work marginally better after adding a little bit of oil to the mechanism, but it still does not appear to work great. As long as you commit to doing 3-point turns, driving can be intuitive, but it's still unclear whether this was the intended behavior. If anyone got one of these new, leave us a comment about the driving experience. I would also add that the base does work with the PF train controller, but this does not make it any easier or more practical to operate. Finally, since we did not get a box, we did not realize that this set has a B and a C model until we flipped through the instructions. They aren't that different or spectacular, but they are a nice touch in an age where we don't see alt models a lot. On that note, this is the end of the video. Please consider subscribing if you like what we do, and have a nice day.